You can't compress too much on the way in, right? Wrong. In this clip, Grant and Carson discuss the vocal chain used on Snowblood and why Grant will often go as hard as 20 dB of compression on the way in. The mixing duo will talk about their love for the manly reference cardioid and why it works so well on almost every singer. Check it out and enjoy.
So let's just bring up the singing vocals first. Grant and I split up our duties where he's kind of like the vocal guy and I'm kind of the music guy.
So there's two vocalists, but both of their vocals, all singing and screaming, was performed into our manly reference cardioid mic, and that runs into my Avalon 737. I have that really just for the preamp section. I think the EQ and the compression was disengaged on those. And that runs into UA 1176. That I'm hitting pretty hard, getting like the needle's pretty much dimed. I think it was like 20 dB gain reduction. I kind of like to compress the shit out of vocals on the way in. I do that because I know what we're going to be doing to our mix in the final analysis. So I love to compress vocals on the way in. I'm not scared to commit to it. You know, at the end of the day, I think that the actual hardware unit sounds awesome and I prefer it to the plugin. Sometimes I'll add additional compression in the mix. We might even do that here. I'm not sure.
We'll do that.
But I find that when tracking a vocalist, not only can I hear what they're singing better, but I feel like the vocalist can too. When they are singing very dynamic, you know, like there might be some moments where they're singing something really quiet, like in the bridge of this song, versus, you know, really loud screaming in like a verse or a chorus here. I find that the artist can hear themselves better. I'm going to use it in the end result anyway. Also, when it comes time to edit, I find that plugins tend to respond better to a very compressed vocal. For instance, if you're tuning a vocal and you have like a very loud source and then it slowly sustains, at a certain point, when things start to get a lot quieter, a lot of algorithms and tuning software will stop picking up the note and you're not able to process it and tune it. So if it's like really, really compressed all the way through and you're going to compress it in the end result anyway, the tuning algorithm will actually pick up that note for the entire duration of the note and you're able to process it better. I also find that it's easier to grid edit things and vocal line if all the information is just visually there in front of you. You're seeing breaths and all kinds of extra noise that you either want at certain points or don't want at other points and you can cut out. Anyway, that's pretty much the explanation for the signal chain that I have going in.
Yeah, what the checks that everyone got, that's just those three things printed to audio: the manly reference, the Avalon pre, and the 1176. I believe it's a Rev D. Yeah, like Grant said, these were just hit pretty hard with the 1176 on the way in, so they're super controlled.
We did a record, man, like 10 years ago or 8 years ago, something like that, where we shot out a large collection of LDCs. We compared the manly reference to an Ocean Way, a Bach.
Yeah, 251, a C12,
a C12,
U87,
U87,
U67. A bunch of really cool, you know, vocal mics. And in a blind test with like pulling other people who were totally objective into the room and just say, hey, listen to this, what sounds best? Everyone every time picked the manly. And that's kind of been, honestly, for a long time, that's kind of been our go-to vocal mic. It was used on both singing and screaming vocals. So both vocalists had the same mic signal chain on the way in.
I've heard a lot of people sing praises about this mic. I've also heard a lot of people say that they hate it. I've heard both ends of the spectrum, but to me, at the end of the day, the blind listen, or like the blind test, is kind of the ultimate determining factor for me on a lot of things, because you're not looking at a logo or, you know, thinking about a price tag. And it's a good like middle price range. You know, I think it's $2,500. So it's not like, you know, a $10,000 microphone. It's also not a $300 microphone. But I think, in my opinion, it performs.
It's a great tube
amazingly.
I mean, people tend to hear things with like more high end and think it sounds more hi-fi, and that mic is definitely hyped in the high end, but I think that's the reason we like it. You know, it's just got so much detail and it's still got a really good like full body to it as well for all kinds of vocals. So yeah, that's definitely kind of the go-to vocal mic.
I'll use different tuning software for different things. So while I'm tracking vocals, I'll tend to use well, on this, I probably used Auto-Tune EFX, but now I'm using Slate Metatune, which is essentially the same thing. That plugin just wasn't out at the time that we tracked this. I like to run tuning software live while a vocalist is tracking, and I'll set the key. Most of the time, I'll set it up on an auxiliary track that I hear, but the vocalist is getting the pre-version, so they're hearing it unaffected and untuned. This kind of allows me to take the tuning part of the vocal performance out of the equation, because if they are singing really passionately but out of tune, that's probably the first thing you're going to notice when you're listening, is that, wow, that take was no good. But like if it was just slightly out of tune, and like, you know, tuning software can help push that note into the note center, then you're just listening and you're like, wow, I love the emotion in that take. That's great. That's going to edit fantastically. So I've found that to be a great tool for that purpose. So while tracking and editing, I'll have that on. Most of the time, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's almost like you're kind of pre-visualizing how certain takes will respond to tuning. So like if someone gets a take that's really good and really close, it'll sound very natural coming through that aux track that Grant's monitoring with Metatune on it. You know what I mean? Like the less weird tuning artifacts and stuff you hear, the more spot on the take was, basically. So he can use that as a good measuring stick to pick takes and comp vocals together based on how they react to like the live tuning. That's just kind of for monitoring purposes.
From that point, I'd say about 80 to 90% of the time, if I really want to tune a vocal, I'll actually then disable Metatune and go in and tune everything by hand, just to get really precise with it. And I'll use Waves Tune for that. I know a lot of people like to use Auto Tune. One day I just tried Waves Tune about 10, 12 years ago and learned it, got used to it. I saw some other people using it and I liked the features in it. I think they're pretty similar, actually. For graphical tuning, that's kind of just the one that I learned and know the best, and I'm able to get the result quickly. I think it sounds really good to me, so I use Waves Tune for that purpose. About the other like 10 to 20% of the time, I'll actually use the Metatune vocal if it does its job. Like a lot of times if I'm doing like an indie production where I want it to be like tuned, but not totally perfect, like I want some imperfection in there. When you would look at a graph, you'd see something that looks out of tune, but you know, like to your ear, it sounded fine. Sometimes some of that stuff is cool to leave in there, and it's easy to go overboard. So I'll occasionally stick with, you know, Metatune in the final analysis. I used to use Melodyne back in the day. I know a lot of people also prefer Melodyne, but for me, for singing, I found that the set of tools that I have in Waves Tune, if I want to get really surgical, I just have some options in Waves Tune that are not available to me in Melodyne, or I'm not able to get to the same result as quickly. I found a workflow in Waves Tune where I can get to the end result with less clicks.